There's a quiet sorrow that lives inside deep thinkers. It doesn't cry out, it doesn't beg for attention. It simply lingers, like a shadow resting on the soul. It's the burden of noticing everything, of hearing the unspoken, of feeling what others refuse to acknowledge. You might be surrounded by people, laughter echoing around light-hearted talk. Someone jokes about the weather. Another shares some trivial gossip. Everyone nods along, smiles, keeps the mood afloat. Then you speak. You say something real, something raw, something that disrupts the surface-level rhythm, and suddenly the air changes. No one laughs, no one replies. A subtle discomfort enters the room. Someone shifts in their seat. Another clears their throat. Then someone says, "Anyway." The moment passes, but you felt it. That quiet rejection, that small fracture between you and the rest. It happens more than you'd like to admit. Carl Jung understood this well. He believed that the deeper one dives into their inner world, the more distant they become from the external one. Not because they're flawed, but because the world favors illusions. It praises those who fit in, who conform, who smile and agree without thinking twice, even when their inner world is in shambles. But deep thinkers, they don't play that game. They can't. They see behind the masks, through empty rituals, through false warmth, through systems built on hollow truths. Jung once said, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the collective unconsciousness of society." That wasn't praise. That was a warning. Because in a world that dismisses depth, self-awareness isn't a gift, it's a burden. And that burden begins young. As children, deep thinkers ask the questions others avoid. Why do adults lie? Why are the rules unfair? Why does love feel like a reward, not a constant? But instead of honest answers, they're told, "Stop asking so much. Just do as you're told." Why can't you be like the others? So they learn to fall silent. But their questions don't stop. They only deepen, sharpen, expand. By adulthood, they've constructed entire universes within. Worlds made of unspoken truths and emotions that have no place in a superficial culture. But out here, in the real world, they're told to follow scripts at work, to say what's expected, in relationships, to tone it down, online, to stay positive. So, they hide again, not because they want to, but because they've learned what happens when they don't. Jung believed society fears what it cannot comprehend, and deep thinkers, they're often misinterpreted. Speak a complex truth and you're trying to be clever. Stay quiet and you're cold. Talk about pain and you're dramatic. Ask questions and you're overanalyzing. But you're not overanalyzing. You're simply awake. You see what others miss. You feel what others suppress. And that frightens people, not because you're wrong, but because you're right. You speak truths others spend their lives avoiding. You expose cracks they pretend aren't there. You bring light to places they've kept dark. That's why you're met with resistance, not because of who you are, but because of what you mirror back. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, and most people would rather reject the mirror than face what's within. Ever tried to warn someone of a pattern destroying them? Ever told them a truth too early, too raw, and instead of appreciation you got silence, or anger, or they just disappeared? You weren't being pessimistic, you were being real. But real is uncomfortable. Real doesn't sell. Real doesn't entertain. Real makes people reflect. And reflection stings. Jung said most people don't think. They rearrange their biases. They echo what they've heard. They perform. But deep thinkers, they dismantle. They question. They reconstruct. They lose sleep over contradictions. They don't chase applause. They seek understanding. And for that, they often lose approval. That's the sorrow of awakening. The deeper your awareness, the greater your isolation. Not because you're flawed, but because most are still asleep. Yet you still long to connect. You try to dim your light, soften your truths, pretend to belong. But truth has a frequency, and once you've tuned in, you can't go back. So what now? Where do you go when the world avoids the very essence of who you are? That's the question we explore next. If you've ever felt like you were too much for the world, you were never wrong. You were simply born into a system built for surfaces. Jung called it mass-mindedness, the idea that most people don't form their beliefs, they inherit them. They absorb them from culture, never questioning if they're real or right or even their own. From birth, you're given a script: what's good, what's bad, what success looks like, what failure means. You're taught to obey, to smile when you're breaking, to please even when you're in pain.